Hello, my name is Mitch, and I draw Blood Force, and we're here today to wrap up the first Valiant story arc. Unless you count WWF or Captain N. You might. I mean, I certainly do myself, but I have to wonder about, everybody else, right? But just before we get into it, if you enjoy the channel, if you feel like you might want to support me a little bit as an artist, there are links in the description that can lead you to my Patreon or my Instagram, where you can commission some artwork if you like. But let's get into this now. So, we're wrapping things up. Everything is coming to a head. If we recall what happened in the issues before this, Magnus, who is the hero of North Am in the year 4001, he's the bane of rogue robots everywhere, which was a pretty cushy job right up until some kind of pulse went out that turned 10 million robots into free will. That gives them sentience. Now, all of a sudden, he has to start considering, well, if a robot has sentience, is it a life form? Do I really have the right to kill it for no reason? It's one thing when a robot just goes haywire and I smash its face in. That's okay. But if I'm smashing in something that has a life, it has a personality, it has a point of view, that's a bit of a problem for me. And on the robot side of things, they're trying to secure their own fate. First by trying to negotiate with the humans, then by trying to kind of coerce them by sabotaging different utilities, different aspects of future civilization, and then by just all-out assault on Central Rob, which is the robot mainframe. Because if they can get the robot mainframe, they can get control of all the robots. That's kind of it, because the future is completely mechanized. Everything is run by robots. There's 32 billion robots running the joint. And where we left off, the leader of the Free Will Robs had just gotten a way to control all of those regularly programmed robots. So we're in dire straits. So let's start off here. This is, again, September. So we've been on a monthly schedule since issue 2. That's always good. We get our Art Nichols cover, which is pretty good. Got Magnus facing off against a giant golden robot, against a horde of other robots. And will we see this come up in the issue? Given what we've seen in previous issues, I think we actually will. That is one thing that I gotta think that's a Jim Shooter mandate. It's like, no, I want things that are actually in the issue to show up on the cover. I don't want any lies. I don't want any propaganda. I don't want it to be an ad. I just want, okay, this is what you're going to see if you pick up this issue. And I don't disagree with the approach. It's not exactly what I want. I don't mind a bit of hyperbole on a cover. That's fine. But, I mean, if you pick up a comic going, damn, that looks cool. I probably, I want to open it up. It's not actually going to be. And then it's actually in there. I think that's all right. Okay, so let's get into it. Right off the hop, we've got OX1. Oh, no, I got it wrong again. God damn it. O1X, who is in control of Central Rob. And we've been starting off every issue with a splash page. So this is just kind of continuing that tradition. This is kind of awkward, to be honest. This is probably the weakest of the lot. Like, the first one was weird, with that shot of 1A set against the sea. This is almost all kind of a little bit Kirby-ish tech. And then O1X here going, ha ha, I am victorious. And he's going to give us a brief rundown of what exactly the deal is, which is I am in absolute control of all 32.5 billion of North Am's robots. Now I will subjugate humankind in one fell swoop. I am so happy. And now we're going to cut to the Botanical Gardens. And this is Leisha, Magnus's, I guess, kind of ex-girlfriend. And she's crying on the shoulder of Timbuk, who's like the only other competent commander in North Am, as far as I can tell. And she doesn't understand why Magnus left her. And Timbuk's like, I know why he left you, because you're self-centered. You're a pampered little princess. Which is most people at this time. They're all just kind of socialites. Since everything is mechanized, assuming that you're in the upper class, you live a life of luxury, and everything you do at any time is just, it's whatever you want. And all of your needs are catered to. And he calls her to her face, a bored, spoiled little girl. And it was exciting to be Magnus's girlfriend for a while, and then, you can play the damsel in distress, and he can rescue, and all that kind of stuff. And then the war started, and you actually got legitimately fucked up. And don't forget, you went through this with Magnus, where you were like, don't you love me? And he's like, yes, come with me. And you said no, because that would mean going down into the dirt and not being pampered anymore. So it's an interesting little confrontation here, really. And Tivbook's all right with that, because he likes spoiled, pampered Legia. He really only cares about how she looks, so she doesn't have to improve herself for him. Which is good. He's accepting of how she is, And while they're having this little heart-to-heart, they actually get blindsided by, I believe they're escorts here, actually. Yes, because these are regular Robs. These are just normal guard Robs. But now that O1X has control of the central main brain, then he can just command them to take them prisoner. O1X puts out a newscast stating, none of your robots are going to obey your commands anymore. We have control of Central Rob, and we're going to decide what we want to do with you. And they actually dropped the resistance is futile. And this would have been about a year after Best of Both Worlds, Part 1. So it is still kind of fresh at the time. I suppose that's okay. When Rob does it, 2 years from here, then it's you're getting a little old. But at this point, it's just kind of like, I don't know. Hey, we're into geeky stuff too. So the robots are all celebrating. And O1X is so happy that he's going to give everybody the rundown on how things got to be how they are now. So we start off with T1, who has been mentioned a couple of times. He was the first free will Rob, which I must have missed when I was doing the previous ones. And he had the ability to command other robots in his vicinity, and he almost brought humankind to its knees by himself. So O1X describes how he went out into the woods to go and get the pieces of T1 to upgrade himself so that he could control other robots. And O1X is under the impression that the surgery nearly killed him, and the robot who was assisting him, W23, left him for dead, when actually what it is W23 smashed him in. And a human came and repaired him. This is, I don't remember her name. She's a goth, which is a poor scrapper in this case. And O1X wandered off with the T1 parts, which was the bit of plot that kind of that was a bit glaring at the end. Like, why didn't you take either the corpse of O1X or the T1 parts or both? W23, what were you thinking? But it ended up being, this is how we're going to resolve the story, so, okay. And O1X made his way to Central Rob, where the humans were celebrating their victory over the rogue robots. And O1X was able to just walk right in because he can command all the robots in the vicinity now that he's been upgraded with the T1 parts. And it's interesting, he's walking around with a cane, which is also what 1A was doing at the beginning. So we've got it's like Obi-Wan versus the Emperor kind of thing. And so they hooked O1X up to the mainframe, or the main brain, one of those mains. And now he's in control. And they got to figure out what they want to do with humanity. And 015 here says, I say kill them all. And we've seen 015 a couple of times before that. They'll go into that a bit more. And then Tekla, who is W23, only with an upgraded body, says there has been enough killing. And they're like, what the fuck is up with that weird-looking robot? It looks like a human. And it doesn't speak all weird. Kill that shit. And Tekla's like, no, if you judge me by my looks, then you are just like the humans. Oh, well, we're not like the humans. You shut your face. Well, no, don't judge. Talk things. And Tekla points out that while they have control of the main brain, there is no threat. There is no reason to kill humans. So why don't we just kind of decide what we want to do as a species, and we can kind of ignore them, really. You know, like just let's be merciful, and let's just try and like go forward peacefully. And maybe we can eventually come to some sort of peace with the humans, right? And O1X says that makes sense. Actually, yes, no, okay, I can't really argue with that. Except for one thing, Magnus. Magnus can actually stand against us and could potentially fuck up our whole deal. So that has to be resolved. And 015 is like, I'm going to deal with that with Magnus, don't you worry. So they go down to the research facility to get some modifications for 015. And at first, the head scientist says, well, she's just like, nah, I'm not going to do that. Okay, cool. You see that aide over there? Take his arm off and then ask her again. And it's like, all right, no, don't do that. And 015 is going to point out that he was the robot who beat the shit out of her in the last issue. And that she's been rebuilt nicely, so good job on that. So, do this right or there won't be anything left to fix. And then cutting back to the main brain, Senator Klain in the main brain likes to complain. And he's brought forth because he's not really a senator anymore. The sitting president, first abdicated and then was assassinated. So he's next in line. He's now President Klain. And he gets brought forth in his underwear. Because you don't get no dignity in fucking robot land. And O1X gets to dictate terms now, which is an interesting reversal. In issue 1, O1X broke into the senator's office so that he could request terms for a peaceful transition of some kind. And Senator Klain at the time said, get the fuck out, robot guards, shoot to kill. And he reiterates how he warned him, for every one of us that you kill, we will kill 1,000. And he now estimates that free will robot losses approximate about 1 million. So, here's how things are going to go. 1 hour from now, I will have 10 of your kind executed. Next hour, 100. Next hour, 1,000. And so on until 1 billion humans are dead. Or Magnus surrenders. President Klain really doesn't have to think about that for too long. There's a second of that we can't do that. We can't surrender Magnus. He's pretty much our only hope. But it's 1 billion fucking people. We kind of have to. We lost. These are the terms. One person, that's not the worst thing. So Senator Klain goes on the broadcast to request that Magnus turn himself in, which is reasonable. Everything here has been reasonable, actually. That's one of the things I'm really enjoying about this, is the fact that there are multiple twists, and then people have to react, and the reactions are plausible, given the characters involved. It's like it's a story of some kind. So, Tekla goes off into the Goth lands to go to approach Magnus, and they have to figure out a solution. And they bring up Magnus's comlink, where he can eavesdrop on the robot frequency. Because this is going to come up during the issue. And he received a message from 1A over this comlink just a few minutes ago, and 1A said, fight to the end. So he can't surrender. This is his programming. And we get a brief thing where Alicia is like, what is love? Baby, don't hurt me. And we get to get Magnus's definition of it, which is, I don't really know. It sounds like a disease. And he's able to arrive at a definition of some kind, which is, it's when you're willing to sacrifice everything for something or someone. And she says, do you love Legia? Because she's got feelings for him now, which is nice. And it's all been, none of this has felt forced in any way. That's, again, one of the nice things is we've seen W23 grow from a confused free will Rob to would-be assassin of Magnus, to kind of grudging equal, to having respect for him, to developing feelings, and now taking on this form that he's supposed to like. And, maybe he does, but it doesn't change anything, right? It's all progressed nicely, And it's kind of natural that we are where we are in the story, which is great. So, cutting back to Central Rob, we've got our captive humans, and they're going to set up the first execution order because it's been an hour and they don't have Magnus yet. So, these are robots. They're going to go by the clock. And Timbuk brings up that Magnus has a comlink that taps him into the robot frequency, which wasn't really mentioned previously. The first time we heard it was in issue 1, and I don't think we really heard it since. But they say here that it came up in the medical scan because he did get admitted to the hospital at one point and then woke up there. And they noticed it at that time, and nobody said anything. Actually, let me check that. You know what? It is here. It's very brief. When Magnus is leaving, when he's had enough of being amongst the humans, and he has to go off on his own, and he abandons Legia, the medical droid approaches Commander Timbuk and says, "You asked to be advised of anything unusual that turned up in Magnus's scans." And that's it. But that is enough. So well done. It's the kind of thing, it's not hard to slip in there. But not everyone's going to remember to do that. Jim Shooter sure shit is. And that's enough that Legia doesn't want anything to do with Timbuk again after this. And the robots take Legia away, which Tekla is going to follow them on. So Magnus is infiltrating Central Rob here, just climbing along the parapet here. That's all right. The balcony, whatever. And in Central Command here, O1X has now been informed of the frequency thing in Magnus's head. And what they're going to do is they're going to let him come in. And they're going to set up a trap for him. So Magnus just kind of walks right in because he doesn't have any reason to suspect that anybody knows about this. Nobody's ever brought it up to him. And they spring the trap, and hundreds of robots descend on Magnus, and he starts smashing. And pretty good stuff. Pretty detailed. And it looks like they almost start to get the upper hand here. This almost looks like a John Byrne shot. Even like the musculature and everything. But the face in particular with the kind of disappearing upper lip, that's a full-on John Byrne thing. So yeah, they start to get the upper hand. Magnus quickly smashes that, leaps for the duct here, and man, can he ever jump, eh? And smashes his way into there. And in there is the goth girl. Man, she doesn't say her name again. I think it's Elsie. Thinking about it, actually. But they don't mention it again. And the robots are not following him in. Magnus immediately deduces that's because they're sealing this place up. We got to get the fuck out of here. And he's going to handle that by smashing his way through the pipe. So Magnus can really smash just about anything. And I think there's a reason for it. I believe we'll find out about it in Unity. But for now, just, it's his concentration. That must be it. So they're going to make their way further out to Central Rob. They're going to go climbing up one of the down tubes because they're trying to surprise him. And they still don't know that Central Rob knows about the frequency thing in Magnus's head. So back up in Central Rob, Tekla's going to check in on Legia, ostensibly to check in on the prisoner, basically trying to sell it like O1X has ordered her to maintain the humans. They need some, they need some food. And back down on level 4, Magnus hears over his comlink that the order has been given to execute Legia Klein if Magnus takes hostile action. Oh, we got a few more here. Again, another one where it got sent in. I guess this is pretty common. Most of the time, like with image number 0, when they did the mail-in thing, you can find quite a few with intact coupons. Nobody bothered with that shit. But no, Valiant readers were sending in for their zeros, it seems. And who we got on the cards here? We got Rye, we got Tekla, and Battle Rob, which I assume, again, is from the original series. And Tekla's trying to interfere a little bit because they're like, okay, stand by. We have to be ready to execute her at any time. The order's been given. And she's going to stand in between Leisha and the other Robs here. And she kind of warns her that Magnus is coming. And Elsie doesn't wait for Magnus. She runs right into the main brain, because she's got a score to settle with O1X for braining her off in that wildlife preserve. And runs right into the thick of battle. This is one thing Art Nichols, I mean, we've seen it a few times now, where he's pretty good at piling up some robots in the background. If you really look at it, it's not a huge looking room, really. And he maybe drew, 20 or so robots. This is O1X here. It feels like it should be a massive amount guarding the main brain, and it doesn't quite feel like it. And Magnus is catching up, but it's a little bit too late for Elsie by the looks of it. This one is inert. And over the comm link, Magnus hears, execution completed. Because he's attacking now. See? Smashy, smashy. And he gets to fight through his tears. Like a true hero. At which point, the now upgraded 015 steps in. As well as quite a few more robots. We couldn't fit them all in this shot here. We're going to make sure for the full page splash. And that's a fair bit more impressive. And he talks about the day Magnus killed his best friend. I'm not sure which one he's referring to, unless it's the one who tried to smash him back in issue 1, I suppose. No, because that's not 015. That's TM6? Yeah, TM6. Okay, so that's not it there. So I'm not sure which one he's talking about. I mean, it could have been anyone, really. Magnus has probably smashed like 100 robots just in panels that we've seen. But anyway, 015 is here to rip Magnus's entrails out. So that's charming. Nice shot with the lunge. And we get the cover shot right there. Again, it's kind of just part of the action. But that's it directly. It might be shrunk down, actually. I think that's exactly the shot. Let me see. Is this guy here on the cover? Yes, he is, too. Okay, so that is it. We just don't have Leisha being held hostage in the background. And Magnus really isn't able to make any kind of headway against 015. He's too upgraded, but the doctor, the scientist, runs in and is able to get out most of, on the numbers. Because I guess she left a weak spot for him. And next time he lunges, Magnus is able to leap in and punch right through the number plate and rip out his wires there. And it looks like all the robots kind of freeze for a second. Which Magnus takes as an opportunity to lunge over everybody, and wade through the Robs, and chop off 01X's head. Just like that. And that's kind of the end of the crisis, really. Honestly, it's a little bit anticlimactic. We did lose Elsie. We got a big sub-boss with 015. He didn't last too long. But yeah, it feels like there should have been more chopping through them here. There should have been a bit more build-up. Something, I don't know. But they do have to pack an awful lot into this particular issue. It feels like maybe it should have been a 5th issue, or even another 10 pages in this issue might have done it. But you got to get it out on time, too. This thing's already 29 pages. And we had a little bit of basically kind of a Phantom Menace deal with the control center with the droids. Although, I mean, here it's a bit more legit in that we know that 01X was controlling the droids. He kept saying that. So now the free will Robs have no backup. And Magnus is, he's going to be pissed because the order went out that Liege is dead. 01X is dead now. They have no direction. They're going to bolt. So that all does make sense. That's okay. And the main brain is able to take over normal function and issues an order to destroy all units evidencing free will. So yeah, they're just going to bolt. And Magnus picks up 015 and hucks him right through the main brain. Which does kind of... I mean, if the goal were to destroy all free will Robs, then that would be a problem. But, I mean, we've seen that the free will Robs' will has broken. It was because they were all of a sudden completely outnumbered. But now that they've started to be routed, there's no reason to just slaughter what's left, I guess. I think that's probably Magnus' thinking. And pretty good destruction shot here. It could be more, I don't know, flamboyant, but it's not like we have any kind of doubt what's going on. And it's not, there's no part of it that's a letdown, really. And while the free will Robs are escaping, Timbuk busts in and starts, blasting down some Robs, because that's about the only thing he's good for. Magnus tackles him to the ground. Quickly sees to the doctor. We're going to get you some medical help. Elsie, stick around. We'll get you help too. So she's not dead. She was just knocked out. Okay. And she's like, nah, I'll go find some goth doctors. Don't need none of these, these fancy people touching my wounds. And they make it to the temporary cell where Legia was being held. There's a big old hole where Tekla was standing in front of Legia. So Magnus is like, maybe she made it out. And Senator McLean here ain't having it. And he starts thanking him for coming in to rescue them, because they didn't really have a plan. There was no plan. All they could do was be subjugated and hope the robots kept their word about being peaceful once Magnus was dead. Magnus was able to basically save the day, only potentially at the cost, really, of Legia. At least at the end there. And the main brain, but Senator Klain isn't particularly worried about that. And Senator Klain gives him a get out of my sight kind of thing. So Magnus goes back down to the Goth level, around where he first met Tekla, when she was upgrading. And Tekla is going to sacrifice her feelings for Magnus, because the free will Robs are going to need her now to provide a leadership presence. So she's learned a thing or two, and there won't be a relationship between those two, at least not now anyway. But that's pretty good. That's a good arc for her. And then we cut to the wildlife preserve, where Tekla meets Legia, unkilled. And Legia is not ready to go back to the city, because she realizes just how useless she's been, essentially. And she's going to stick around here and ask Tekla to train her, basically, to kind of teach her a few things about how to be a person, which is a little ironic. And Tekla's going to learn a bit from her about how to be a socialite. Which, I mean, there are a couple of things she can teach her about, being diplomatic, that sort of thing, which she is going to need going forward. And then for the epilogue here, we cut to Magnus. Again, somewhere in the Goth level, he's found like a surgery droid. And 1A is broadcasting directly to him, saying, well done. You beat the Rebel Rob threat. And now 1A is exhorting him that now that the free will Robs are scattered and they're uncoordinated, now is the best time to hunt them down one by one. So I'm going to need you to come back here so that we can debrief. But while he's saying all this, Magnus is having the surgery Rob. Well, first he shaves his head, cuts his head open, and pulls out the comlink. Smashes it. Seemingly without anesthetic. That's hardcore. And it kind of wounds Magnus to do that, to cut off his only communication with 1A. But, he's got this thing in his head shouting at him constantly, smash robots, smash robots. He doesn't want to do that anymore. So, and of course, the comlink was used against him previously. So he ties a rag around his head, which looks kind of goofy. And everyone's a little unsure if that's him. But doesn't matter if he doesn't have to be Magnus now. He's just a free man. So, we've had character arcs for quite a few people, really, between Magnus, between Tekla, Leisha, even Senator Klain a bit, and the whole landscape of North Am has changed. So this has been a very eventful 4-issue arc. And Solar number 2 is coming out soon. We'll hit some Solar before too long. But that's it for this one. So, that's a pretty good launch title, I gotta say. That's fairly impressive. One thing I've read from jimshooter.com, because I just found out about that recently. That's been up there for like 12 years, and I just saw it recently. So Jim Shooter doesn't seem to hold too much with the 3-act system for a story. Basically, his method is, how did things start? What happened to change that? How did they finish up? So you don't have to necessarily have to do intro the situation, escalate, lowest point, climax, right? In that formula. And we got all of that out of this series. You know, we set the stage with how North Am was, where it's a paradise, well, for some people anyway. And there was a big change with the Ravs getting sentience. There was a big change for Magnus with how he viewed the Ravs. And then it ended in a fairly satisfying way. Like I said, it would have been nice if it would have been longer. I think particularly in things like when Magnus is making his way through Central Rob, he kind of got to the main brain a little too quickly. That could have used a few more pages. That final push through the main brain to get through 015, because again, he didn't put up a huge fight. Magnus wasn't super beat up by the end of it or anything, which would have been good. And then once defeating 015, it feels like there should have been a wall of defense between Magnus and 01X. And then maybe even a little bit more post-mortem. Because we kind of rushed through all of that. So a bit of a pacing issue, but not too bad. And like I said, we kind of end up in a place that makes sense for the story and makes for interesting stories going forward. I kind of figured it would end up with 01X being killed, but the Free Will Rob still existing, because otherwise you just go back to status quo, and that's not all that great unless you come up with another gigantic threat. This way, there's a change to the landscape. The landscape has become more hostile, not only for North Am, but for Magnus in particular, going from the cushy high-rises down to the Goth level. So that could go a lot of interesting places. And since Jim Shooter stays at the reins for a while on Magnus, I think probably until he gets let go by Valiant a year or so from now, I think we might have explored a couple of things. So it'd be good to check out a few Magnuses going forward. But that's going to do it for this one. So let me know what you thought. It's a different deal. Because like I said, we're not breaking down art on this. There's not a whole lot to talk about. It's all pretty good. Nothing's great. Nothing sucks. So if you don't mind going forward doing this kind of thing more often, I do have another couple of story-driven series lined up for the future. Or we can just go back to talking about shitty Image comics. Either way. I mean, we'll do that regardless. Might be nice to kind of balance it out, though. But yeah, this is going to do it for this one. Thanks very much for watching. If you like this video, please hit like, hit subscribe, hit the notifications, so you know what the next thing is. We're going to take a break from story, and we're going to go back to some dumb, nice-looking books. Not necessarily Image next week, but you'll see what I mean. Go over to my Patreon and subscribe there. That'll give you access to all the Blood Force stuff, all the pages and comics, as well as these videos before they make it to YouTube, usually a week or so in advance. After that, go over to my Instagram. Commissions there are now open. But yeah, that's going to do it for this video. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one.